That's my boy, like father, like son, a chip off the old block. Any son of a legendary wrestler who gets into the business no doubt wants to measure up to their fathers, or at least make them proud. The history of the business has seen many a second or third generation performer come in and do just that, with some even going one better and creating a legacy that leapfrogs even that of their famous father. Just look at the likes of Randy Orton or The Rock as examples of wrestlers who carried the burden of expectation but overcame it to become huge stars in their own rights. Nobody really says, hey look, that's Randy Orton, Bob Orton Jr.'s kid. They say, hey look, that's Bob Orton Jr., Randy's father. Growing up as the son of a wrestling superstar and witnessing the adulation and success firsthand, the temptation to follow in their footsteps must be strong. However, failure to measure up can be tough and, in some cases, make a career in the industry unsustainable. Not everyone is going to be a natural by process of DNA, and some wrestling legacies are just impossible to match. Whether fair or not, people are going to look at you and compare you to Pops. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 wrestling sons who couldn't measure up to their fathers. Join us. Number 10, Curtis Axel. So your old man is a legendary Hall of Famer whose ring name and gimmick was that he was literally perfect at everything. No pressure whatsoever, kid. Curt Hennig himself knew a thing or two about filling the shoes of a famous wrestling father, as his dad wrestled successfully as Larry the Axe Hennig. Obviously, Curt did a commendable job, and when he passed away in 2003, he left us as somebody who was both beloved by fans and those within the industry. Though Joe, who wrestled as Curtis Axel as a nod to both his father and grandfather, is an accomplished pro wrestler and has had spells in WWE where it looked like he might be a player, he had mostly been used in minor roles before being released in April 2020. Having been on WWE television for a decade, Axel, who was originally given the completely awful name of Michael McGillicuddy, can count one short Intercontinental title reign, during which he was paired with Paul Heyman, and 2 tag team title reigns as his most notable accomplishments. In his 40s and having been portrayed as an afterthought more often than not, it's hard to see a career resurgence for Perfect's boy anytime soon. Although, in saying that, I do seem to remember his dad returning to WWE for one last hurrah in 2002 at the age of 42. Number 9, David Samartino. Speaking of legacies that are almost impossible to live up to, what chance did young David have of even getting close to approaching somewhere in the general vicinity of his father Bruno's accomplishments? Bruno, a certifiable legend belonging to all Wrestling Hall of Fames that actually count, held the WWE title for 11 years, the longest reign in the promotion's history. Perhaps seeing the love and respect given to his famous father, David made it clear that he wanted to become a pro himself, against the wishes of the Italian strongman who wanted his son to avoid the pitfalls of the industry and get himself a proper college education instead. David defied his dad and began training, making his debut on the independent circuit at age 20. WWE soon came calling and managed to coax Bruno out of retirement for a series of father-son tag team matches. When teaming, the duo were often placed high up on the card in main events. When not, David typically found himself jerking the curtain. Thing is, David just didn't have the charisma, size, or ability of his old man. To be honest, not many people did, of course, but more was expected of David given his lineage. He left WWE along with his father and wrestled sporadically before settling into life as a personal trainer. Number 8, Sim Snuka. The son of Jimmy Snuka, Sim was a second-generation wrestler that had the name, the size, and the athleticism to potentially be a star. After working his way through the independents, Sim was signed to WWE in 2005 and reported to developmental territory OVW for further training. There, he was teamed up with Domino and Cherry and subsequently brought to TV as Deuce and Domino, a 1950s Grease-style throwback tag team. On SmackDown, Deuce and Domino won the tag team titles, ending Brian Kendrick and Paul London's lengthy reign, but dropped them shortly after and gradually began moving down the card before disbanding. Sim was then moved to Raw, where he did much of nothing, but in 2009 he was involved in one of the best wrestling matches of all time. That's right, Sim was the cameraman that failed to catch The Undertaker as the Phenom dove over the top rope to the outside of the ring during his epic showdown with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25. He was released just a few months later in June of 2009 and worked the occasional indie show before fading out of the business. The Deuce gimmick obviously had a short shelf life, and as Sim's son of Jimmy Snuka, he was a pale imitation of the original Superfly. His sister Tamina, however, is still enjoying success in WWE. Number 7. Shawn Stasiak. The grizzled Stan Stasiak was a major star in the 1970s, capturing, amongst others, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation title, which he shockingly took from the beloved Pedro Morales to become just the 5th man to hold it. Stan the Man Stasiak retired in 1984 and passed away in 1997, which was right around the time his son Shawn got into the business. Shawn was signed by WWE in 1998 and debuted on television in April 1999, soon entering a storyline involving the pretty mean sisters. As the boy toy of the threesome, Stasiak, now going by the name Meat and wearing trunks designed to look like Calvin Klein kegs, would lose matches because he was so tired after, servicing his female friends. One time, in another genius idea, Meat was spiked with Viagra before his match and spent the contest pitching a tent. Stasiak was fired after it was revealed that he was secretly recording wrestlers' conversations backstage. He then went to WCW for a bit before coming back to WWE when they acquired the company. His second spell is notable for all the times he tried to attack various wrestlers with comical results, and he mainly wrestled in prelim matches before being released in September 2002. Number 6. Ray Gordy. Terry Bam Bam Gordy was one of wrestling's great big men. Standing 6'6" and weighing 300 pounds, Gordy blazed a trail in the United States as an original member of the Fabulous Freebirds and had an incredible run in Japan, often teaming with Dr. Death Steve Williams as the feared Miracle Violence Connection. Before he sadly passed away in 2001 at the age of 40, Terry left behind 2 daughters and a son who, after receiving some training from his father, had his heart set on continuing the family legacy. Ray Gordy toured Japan and gained a reputation on the indies before being signed by WWE in 2005. After the requisite stint in developmental, Gordy was brought up as Jesse, handler of the scatterbrained but handy Festus. Jesse and Festus had a decent run as a family-friendly tag team on SmackDown, but never captured the tag titles and spun their wheels before being split up in the 2009 draft. From there, Gordy was rechristened Slam Master J, a wannabe rapper of sorts, similar to a gimmick he had done in the minor leagues. His tag team with Jimmy Wang Yang was fun but short-lived, and Ray was released in April 2010, leaving the business to work in law enforcement. Number 5. Eric Watts. Number 5 is one of the most blatant examples of nepotism in the history of the industry. Cowboy Bill Watts was both a feared wrestler and respected booker. He hung up his boots in the 70s and turned to promoting full-time, first for Mid-South/UWF and then WCW. Taking the pencil at Turner in 1992, the Cowboy brought an old-school approach that disgruntled a lot of the wrestlers and production staff. Watts, who once had a rule that he would fire any wrestler who lost an outside-the-ring fight to a civilian, outlawed top-rope maneuvers and forbid the babyfaces and heels from mixing outside the arenas. Not only did he strictly adhere to kayfabe, but he also hired his son Eric, who only had a few months' worth of training under his belt, but, in his daddy's eyes, was ready for the national stage. Few agreed with this assessment and resented the push that the younger Watts received. His more experienced and talented colleagues resented having to carry the amateurish Eric, who also didn't have the charisma or presence to connect with the audience the same way that his old man had in years gone by. Bill Watts was let go not too long after his arrival, resulting in the spotlight rightfully being taken away from Eric, who hung around a little longer before following his father to WWE. Number 4. Brian Christopher. It would be unfair and incorrect to label Brian Christopher a pro wrestling failure. He had a great run in Memphis for the USWA and was part of the tremendously over Too Cool during the height of the Attitude Era. Alongside Scotty 2 Hotty and Rikishi, Christopher as Grandmaster Sexay was good value and added something to the show. But he wasn't Jerry Lawler. Yes, while he may have been an entertaining and solid hand, he was not the king, one of the most popular and decorated wrestlers ever. Jerry Lawler was and is a legend, and Christopher never managed to reach the higher levels on a national stage. Part of his downfall was his penchant for after-hours partying, which led him to lose his job and spend some time in the Slammer, which must have been a blow for his teetotal father. WWE even played up the fact that Brian and Jerry had a sometimes strained relationship during an uncomfortable segment on Raw to help build the Lawler vs. Cole WrestleMania match. In real life, as much as they downplayed the relationship on WWE TV for comedic effect, Lawler in truth dearly loved and was proud of his son, who tragically passed away in 2018 at the age of 46. Number 3. Richie Steamboats. One of the great hopes in WWE developmental territories FCW and NXT was Richie Steamboats. Son of WWE Hall of Famer and one of the best to ever lace a pair of boots, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, young Richie bore a striking resemblance to his old man. A wrestler and football player in high school, Richie had the physical tools, and in 2008 he began his wrestling journey, training with Harley Race and wrestling independently and overseas as Ricky Steamboat Jr. He was then signed to a WWE contract and began the next phase of his training before making the step up to the main roster. Sadly, the main roster never came, as Richie, who won the FCW Grand Slam, feuded with Cassius Ohno and teamed with Seth Rollins, suffered a career-ending back injury in 2012, similar to what forced his father to quit competing in the mid-90s. Richie clearly had a lot more to give before the opportunity was taken away from him while still in his late 20s. He seriously could have possibly become the next Randy Orton or Cody Rhodes had he stayed healthy. Number 2. Ted Dibiase Jr. Placed alongside Orton and Rhodes as a member of Legacy, many saw Ted Dibiase Jr. as having a huge future in the business. He had the look, the fundamentals, and a famous name which gave him an instant credibility with some fans. His WWE career got off to an impeccable start too, as he won the WWE Tag Team titles with Cody in his first televised match. Legacy were given a push, and Ted was even given a starring role in WWE Studios' production The Marine 2. Inevitably, Legacy imploded and began to feud, after which Ted went solo and adopted his dad's old conceited millionaire gimmick. He even brought back the $1 Million Championship and everyone's favorite convention hustler Virgil to be his servant. It was all very familiar, but none of it had the impact of the original. Junior wasn't as charismatic as Senior, and the fans didn't respond to the character. He soon dropped it, but from then on he was on a slide down the card, not helped by frequent injury layoffs. Ted Jr. left WWE by mutual consent in September 2013 after hardly being used on TV for the best part of a year. Number 1. David Flair. Ric Flair currently has one of his offspring riding high in WWE. His daughter Charlotte has established herself as one of, if not the premier performer in the women's division, and is quickly on her way to be considered one of the best ever. Things didn't pan out so well for Flair's son David though, who became a member of the WCW roster in early 1999, having his first match at the Sold Out pay-per-view, teaming with his dad against Barry Windham and Kurt Hennig. The match went fine, but the post-match angle with David receiving a whipping from Hollywood Hulk Hogan caused tension, as the Hulkster allegedly took liberties during the beatdown. Slick Rick, well known for having a handle on his emotions, took the slight about as well as you would expect. Still, David soldiered on and began working regularly for the company, even wrestling his pops in a singles match at the 2000 Great American Bash, and was involved in a memorable storyline around the paternity of Stacy Keibler's child. Don't ask. In the ring, David unfortunately did not possess an ounce of the talent or charisma that his old man did. And what did anyone really expect, since his dad is genuinely, by any measurable, one of the best of all time? David, for his part, never actually really wanted to get in the business to begin with, and had goals of becoming a patrol car driving, speed ticket writing, night shift working state trooper.